When my son informed me that I needed to find somewhere else to fade away because I was nothing but a burden now, I gathered my belongings like the compliant mother I had always been. 3 days later, I found myself seated in an attorney's office, uncovering that my supposedly devoted husband and father-in-law had orchestrated the most elaborate scheme imaginable. Michael was about to discover that sometimes the piece you underestimate becomes the game changer. If you're following this story, please subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Let me share how I transformed from a discarded widow to the woman who controlled the entire board. Because, darling, this tale has more surprises than a mystery novel convention. 2 months prior, I was Eleanor Davidson, faithful wife of 43 years and mother to one remarkably selfish son. When Thomas passed away from a massive stroke at 71, I believed my existence was crumbling. Michael descended upon me during my mourning period like a scavenger in expensive suits, lamenting about how challenging this transition must be for me. Mother, you simply cannot handle this enormous estate by yourself, he declared, his tone saturated with manufactured sympathy. The upkeep, the responsibilities, all these painful reminders. It's unhealthy for your mental state. I should have recognized the scheming beneath his apparent compassion. Michael had always been Thomas's pride and joy, his golden child who never faced consequences. When he wed that corporate attorney, Jessica, and began providing great-grandchildren, Thomas lavished attention on them all. Meanwhile, I remained simply the woman who prepared meals, maintained order, and ensured everything functioned seamlessly. Following the burial service, Michael became progressively demanding regarding my circumstances. He would arrive with Jessica for family gatherings where they would ambush me with property listings and assisted living facility brochures. Mother, these establishments are remarkable. You would have companions your age, entertainment, 0 obligations. What they actually meant was no inheritance to divide, no troublesome mother to manage. The devastating moment arrived last Tuesday. I had been residing in what Michael now referred to as our estate for 6 weeks following Thomas's passing, still occupying the guest quarters because I couldn't bring myself to sort through our master suite. Michael appeared without warning alongside Jessica and 2 enormous travel bags. Mother, we've reached a conclusion. Jessica received the partnership offer, and we must relocate to the city immediately. This estate is ideal for our needs. I gazed at him, struggling to comprehend. Relocate here, but this is my residence. Michael's facade cracked momentarily, exposing the ruthless calculation beneath. Actually, Mother, according to Father's testament, I inherited everything. The estate, the portfolio, all assets. I've been permitting you to remain here from generosity, but it's time for you to establish your own arrangements. The statement struck me like a physical assault. Michael, surely there's been some error. No error whatsoever. Father understood I would preserve his legacy far better than you ever could. You never grasped finances or investments. You were merely the spouse. Merely the spouse. 43 years diminished to those 3 words. That's when he delivered the final devastation. Find somewhere else to waste away. You're worthless now. I assembled my possessions in one day. 43 years of marriage compressed into 2 suitcases and a small container of photographs. Michael observed from the entrance, glancing at his timepiece as though I was delaying something crucial. There's a pleasant senior facility on Elm Street, he suggested with the enthusiasm of someone recommending a decent diner. Very reasonably priced. I'm confident they have availability. Reasonably priced. My son was inheriting $60 million, and he was proposing I examine what was essentially a government facility for the aging. Jessica loaded my luggage into their Mercedes with the efficiency of someone discarding refuse. Eleanor, "You'll appreciate having your freedom again," she remarked, avoiding direct eye contact. "No more concerns about estate maintenance or property assessments. No more home," she meant. As we departed, I observed my house, Thomas's house, Michael's house now, vanish in the side mirror. The contradiction wasn't overlooked by me. I had spent 4 decades transforming that house into a home, organizing Michael's celebrations, caring for Thomas during his decline, preserving every detail he valued. Now I was being transported to an economy motel, like an unwelcome visitor who had exceeded their stay. The Restful Lodge was precisely what you would anticipate from a place charging $59 nightly. Paper-thin walls, threadbare linens, and carpeting that had witnessed superior eras. Michael handed me $300 in bills like he was compensating a service worker. "This should sustain you for several days while you establish yourself," he stated. "I'll have Jessica wire some funds into your account once we examine Father's documentation. Some funds from my own inheritance." After their departure, I sat on the sagging bed and attempted to process what had just occurred. Within 4 hours, I had transformed from mourning widow to destitute senior citizen. The man I had raised, cherished, and sacrificed for had abandoned me like an outdated medication. But as I remained there in that miserable motel room, something began troubling me. Thomas had always been precise about his business, obsessively systematic regarding crucial documents. He had presented me the testament years earlier, clarifying his intentions, ensuring I comprehended everything, and I was completely certain that wasn't what it had specified. Thomas had been many things: conventional, occasionally inflexible, sometimes condescending about financial matters, but he wasn't heartless. The man who had supported me through my father's passing, who had surprised me with bouquets every anniversary, wouldn't have abandoned me destitute. The following morning, I utilized the motel's internet to locate Thomas's attorney, Benjamin Whitmore, the same legal counsel who had managed our property acquisition and various business transactions throughout the years. His office was located downtown, a 25-minute bus journey that depleted my limited cash, but seemed essential. Benjamin Whitmore was a refined gentleman in his 70s with compassionate eyes behind metal-framed spectacles. When his assistant announced that Mrs. Davidson was present regarding her husband's estate, he appeared genuinely astonished. "Eleanor, my dear, I was questioning when you would visit. I attempted contacting your residence multiple times, but Michael indicated you were vacationing." "Vacationing?" That's what my son had informed him. "Mr. Whitmore, I must inquire about Thomas's testament." He appeared confused. "Certainly. Didn't Michael supply you with your copy?" I provided him the original and multiple copies following the proceeding. My stomach plummeted. There was a proceeding. "Eleanor, you were supposed to attend. Michael claimed you were too devastated, that he would manage everything and ensure you received your inheritance." The blood left my face as the truth struck me. "Mr. Whitmore, I was never informed about any proceeding. Michael told me he inherited everything." Benjamin Whitmore's expression transformed from bewilderment to concern. He reached for a substantial file folder, his movements suddenly pressing. "Eleanor, that's impossible. Your husband's testament is very explicit about your inheritance." He extracted a document. I recognized Thomas's precise signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. But as Benjamin began reading, I realized Michael had deceived me about everything. "I, Thomas Edward Davidson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Eleanor Grace Davidson, the following: our primary residence at 1247 Willowbrook Estate, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave her 65% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts totaling approximately $42 million. My head began spinning. $42 million. The house, 65% of everything. Benjamin continued reading, his voice growing more grave. To my son, Michael Davidson Turner, I leave $18 million to be held in trust with distributions beginning on his 40th birthday, contingent upon his treatment of his mother following my death, contingent upon his treatment of me. Thomas had understood. Somehow he had known precisely what Michael would attempt to do. Mr. Whitmore, I whispered. Michael told me he inherited everything because Father believed I couldn't manage finances. Eleanor, that's completely false. Your husband specifically requested that I explain his reasoning to you personally. He was concerned about Michael's character, particularly his sense of entitlement and his wife's influence. The room seemed to rotate. You mean Thomas knew Michael might try something like this? Thomas was extremely worried about it. That's why he structured the inheritance this way and insisted on the contingency clause. If Michael mistreated you after his death, he would forfeit his inheritance entirely. It would instead go to the charitable foundation Thomas established. I stared at the testament, struggling to comprehend the implications. Mr. Whitmore, what constitutes mistreatment? Thomas was very specific. Fraud, coercion, abandonment, financial abuse, emotional abuse, or any attempt to deprive you of your rightful inheritance. Based on what you've described, Michael has violated multiple conditions. Benjamin leaned forward, his expression serious. Eleanor, Michael committed fraud by concealing the testament reading and lying about its contents. He's also guilty of elder abandonment and emotional abuse. According to your father's testament, Michael has forfeited his entire inheritance. But there's something else, something that makes this situation even more complex. He pulled out another document. Before Thomas passed, he came to see me privately. He suspected Michael might attempt exactly what he's done, so he took additional precautions. Thomas secretly recorded several conversations with Michael, where your son discussed plans to contest the will and remove you from the house, regardless of its contents. My heart stopped. He recorded him? Thomas was meticulous about protecting you. He also hired a private investigator to document Michael's lifestyle and spending habits. The evidence shows Michael has been living far beyond his means, accumulating substantial gambling debts. He needed that inheritance immediately to avoid serious financial consequences. Benjamin opened another folder. Eleanor, your husband also discovered something troubling about Jessica's law firm. They've been under investigation for client fund misappropriation. Michael and Jessica were planning to use your inheritance to cover their debts and escape potential criminal charges. The magnitude of their betrayal was staggering. They weren't just stealing my inheritance. They were using it to cover up their own crimes. Mr. Whitmore, what happens now? Now we contact the authorities. Michael's actions constitute multiple felonies. You'll regain your home and inheritance, and Michael will face the consequences of his choices. But first, Benjamin smiled with satisfaction, we're going to let Michael believe he's succeeded. We'll gather more evidence of his fraud, while he incriminates himself further. Sometimes the best justice comes from allowing criminals to construct their own prison. Would you be willing to help us? Build a case against your son? I thought about the woman who had packed her life into suitcases 3 days ago. The woman who had accepted Michael's cruelty as inevitable. That woman was gone. Mr. Whitmore, what do you need me to do? Benjamin's smile widened. We're going to teach Michael that when you play games with people's lives, sometimes you lose everything. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Benjamin would contact Michael, claiming I had requested a meeting to sign additional documents transferring my remaining personal property to him. Michael's greed would compel him to attend. providing us opportunity to record his admissions of fraud while federal agents monitored from nearby vehicles. 3 days later, I sat in Benjamin's conference room, wearing a recording device and watching my son's true character emerge as he believed he was about to complete his theft of my life. Michael, I need to understand something about your father's testament. You mentioned I inherited nothing except what you choose to provide me. Michael leaned back in his leather chair, radiating confidence. That's correct, Mother. Father was very clear that I should manage everything. You understand finances never were your strength. But surely Thomas left me something. Some small provision for my security. Michael's mask slipped entirely. Mother, you need to accept reality. Father knew you would squander any inheritance within months. This way, with me controlling everything, you'll have what you need without the responsibility of managing wealth. I watched my son lie with such conviction that I almost believed him myself. Michael, I'm confused about the house. When did your father decide to leave it to you? Michael's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He made that decision years ago, Mother. He often discussed your lack of business sense, your inability to handle complex financial matters. He wanted his legacy protected. Every word was being recorded. Every lie. Documented. Benjamin caught my eye and nodded slightly. Michael was confessing to fraud while believing he was justifying his actions to his helpless mother. So, the $60 million? Michael continued, will be invested properly instead of wasted on your sentimental nonsense. Father would approve of our practical approach. $60 million. Michael had just revealed he knew the exact amount, contradicting his earlier claims about inheritance taxes and reduced assets. He was confirming our suspicions about his premeditated fraud. Michael, how did you know the precise amount if you only recently received the testament details? Michael froze, realizing his mistake. The attorney provided preliminary figures during our initial consultation, but his confidence was cracking. Benjamin seized the moment. Mr. Turner, would you be surprised to learn that your mother was supposed to attend the testament reading? That federal law requires all primary beneficiaries to be notified. Directly? The color drained from Michael's face. I don't understand what you're implying. Benjamin smiled coldly. I'm not implying anything, Mr. Turner. I'm stating facts. You committed fraud by concealing the testament reading from your mother. You forged documents claiming authority over her inheritance. You violated multiple federal statutes regarding elder abuse and financial fraud. Michael looked trapped, his eyes darting between Benjamin and me. This is ridiculous. I was protecting my mother from stress during her grief period. Any reasonable person would understand that. Mr. Turner, Benjamin's voice remained steady. Would a reasonable person also understand why you've been living in the house you claim to inherit while your mother lives in a budget motel? Michael's carefully constructed lies were unraveling. Mother chose to leave. She wanted independence. I never forced her to do anything. That's interesting, Benjamin replied, because we have recordings of you telling her to find somewhere else to die and that she was useless now. We also have documentation of you removing her belongings and changing the house locks. Michael shot up from his chair. You recorded private family conversations? This is entrapment. Benjamin remained seated, calm and professional. Mr. Turner, your father installed those recording devices months before his death. He suspected you might attempt exactly what you've done. Thomas Davidson was protecting his wife from his son. The conference. Room door opened, and 2 federal agents entered. Michael Davidson Turner, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, inheritance fraud, and federal conspiracy charges. Michael's face went white as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. This is insane. I'm protecting my mother's interests. You people don't understand our family dynamics. Agent Rodriguez, a stern woman in her 40s, read Michael his rights while Agent Thompson secured evidence. Mr. Turner, we understand your family dynamics. Perfectly. We've been investigating your wife's law firm for 18 months. Your fraud scheme provided the final evidence we needed to prosecute multiple cases of client fund theft. Jessica's law firm was under federal investigation. Michael's inheritance fraud was connected to a larger criminal enterprise. The scope of their crimes was far beyond what I had imagined. Agent Rodriguez approached me with respectful professionalism. Mrs. Davidson, we'll need your statement. But first I want you to know that you're completely safe now. Your son and daughter-in-law will face significant federal charges. As Michael was led away in handcuffs, he turned back to me with desperate eyes. Mother, you don't understand what you're doing. Jessica and I needed that money to fix some temporary problems. If you pursue this, you'll destroy our family forever. I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved, who had tried to leave me homeless and destitute to cover his own crimes. Michael, you destroyed our family the moment you decided to steal everything your father worked for and leave me with nothing. Agent Rodriguez, I'm ready to provide my statement. After the arrests, Benjamin and I returned to his office to discuss the recovery of my inheritance and property. Eleanor, within 48 hours you'll have full access to your accounts and legal possession of your home. The federal seizure will be lifted once we complete the paperwork. But there's something else we discovered. During the investigation, Thomas left additional instructions that were sealed until specific conditions were met. Benjamin retrieved another document from his safe. Your husband anticipated that Michael might attempt fraud, so he prepared contingency measures. If Michael violated the testament conditions, Thomas wanted you to receive his business partnership shares as well. What business partnership? Thomas was a silent partner in several technology companies. Those investments have grown substantially since his death. Combined with your inheritance, your total assets now exceed $75 million. I stared at Benjamin, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Thomas's planning and protection. Eleanor, your husband spent the last 2 years of his life ensuring you would be financially secure, regardless of Michael's actions. He loved you enough to anticipate and prevent your son's betrayal. Thomas's final gift wasn't just money. It was the guarantee that I could never be made vulnerable again by people who were supposed to protect me. The next morning, I returned to my home for the first time in 2 weeks. Federal agents had secured the property and documented Michael's illegal occupation as evidence. As I walked through rooms I had thought I'd lost forever, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete security. My phone rang as I stood in the kitchen Thomas and I had designed together 30 years earlier. Mrs. Davidson, this is Janet Chen from Channel 7 News. We're covering your story about elder financial abuse and inheritance fraud. Would you be willing to discuss your experience to help other families recognize warning signs? My story was becoming public. Media outlets were requesting interviews, and senior advocacy groups were asking me to speak at their events. The private humiliation Michael had intended for me was transforming into public awareness that might protect other families from similar betrayals. Janet, I would be honored to share my experience if it helps prevent other families from enduring what I've survived. Within weeks, I was appearing on national television programs, testifying before congressional committees about elder abuse legislation, and consulting with law enforcement agencies about family financial fraud patterns. But the most satisfying moment came 6 weeks after Michael's arrest, when I received a call from Agent Rodriguez. Mrs. Davidson, I have news about your son and daughter-in-law's case. The federal investigation uncovered evidence of a much larger conspiracy. Jessica's law firm was operating as a money laundering operation for organized crime families. My blood chilled. Money laundering. For how long? Agent Rodriguez's voice remained professional, but I could hear the satisfaction beneath her composure. Our investigation indicates at least 5 years of activity. Your son wasn't just stealing your inheritance, Mrs. Davidson. He was planning to use it to purchase silence from very dangerous people who had discovered his wife's criminal activities. The implications hit me like a thunderbolt. Michael and Jessica weren't just thieves. They were criminals connected to organized crime. Their desperation for my inheritance wasn't about greed. It was about survival. Mrs. Davidson, we believe your son's gambling debts were actually payments to criminal associates who were blackmailing him about Jessica's money laundering activities. Agent Rodriguez, are you telling me that Michael's inheritance fraud was part of a larger criminal enterprise? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Your husband's careful planning didn't just protect you from family betrayal. It helped us expose a significant organized crime operation. Thomas Davidson's investigation into his son's activities provided crucial evidence for federal prosecutors. The room seemed to spin as I processed this revelation. My husband had known about Michael's criminal connections. Agent Rodriguez continued with increasing gravity. Mrs. Davidson, your husband contacted federal authorities 8 months before his death. He suspected his son's involvement in criminal activities and wanted to protect you from potential retaliation. Thomas had been working with federal investigators to document Michael's crimes while ensuring my safety after his death. The complex inheritance structure wasn't just about family dynamics. It was about criminal justice. Mrs. Davidson, your husband's cooperation was instrumental in building cases against multiple crime families. His death interrupted our investigation, but Michael's fraud attempt provided the final evidence we needed. I sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the scope of Thomas's protective measures. He had anticipated not just Michael's greed, but the dangerous criminal connections that motivated it. Agent Rodriguez, what happens to Michael and Jessica now? Federal charges for inheritance fraud, elder abuse, money laundering, and conspiracy with organized crime figures. They're facing 25 to 30 years in federal prison. The reality of Michael's situation was staggering. My son wasn't just a greedy child who had betrayed his mother. He was a career criminal who had endangered our entire family through his association with organized crime. But there's something else, Mrs. Davidson. The federal government wants to compensate you for your husband's cooperation in our investigation. Compensate me? Your husband's information led to the seizure of over $300 million in criminal assets and the arrest of 67 individuals across multiple crime families. The Federal Victim Compensation Program entitles you to a substantial reward for your family's cooperation and sacrifice. The amount they mentioned was breathtaking. Combined with my inheritance and Thomas's business investments, I was looking at total assets exceeding $100 million. My transformation from discarded widow to protected, federal witness to wealthy philanthropist was complete, but the personal cost was devastating. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated kitchen of my restored home, preparing breakfast for my attorney and my new financial advisor. The morning light illuminated countertops I had chosen myself in a house that legally belonged to me, purchased with money I had rightfully inherited from a husband who had loved me enough to anticipate and prevent my son's betrayal. Good morning, Eleanor. Sarah. Mitchell, my financial consultant and former federal prosecutor, appeared in the doorway carrying a comprehensive portfolio of investment reports. Good morning, Sarah. Are you ready for our quarterly assessment? The previous 6 months had been an intense period of legal proceedings, media appearances, and personal transformation. Michael and Jessica were each serving 28-year federal sentences in separate maximum security facilities. The media coverage of their crimes had transformed. me into a national spokesperson for elder protection advocacy. Your portfolio is performing exceptionally well, Sarah announced, settling at my new breakfast table. The charitable foundation is fully operational, and the scholarship program has already selected its first recipients. The Eleanor Davidson Foundation for Elder Financial Protection had become my primary focus. Using $40 million of my inheritance, we were funding legal assistance for seniors facing family financial abuse and supporting legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. Any updates on the documentary project? HBO confirmed the production agreement. They want to begin filming next month. My story had attracted media attention far beyond the initial news coverage. The Mother's Justice, an American crime story, was being developed as a limited series with proceeds benefiting elder advocacy organizations. And Michael, Sarah's expression grew cautious. He's written again. His attorney says he wants to apologize and request forgiveness. Michael had written me 23 letters from federal prison. I had read the first several, which ranged from self-justifying to desperate, before deciding to stop opening them. Some relationships, once shattered, cannot be repaired with words alone. Sarah has my position on that changed, not according to our previous discussions, but people do evolve, Eleanor. Even people who have made terrible choices can genuinely transform. I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, grieving, dependent, willing to accept whatever dignity my family offered me. That woman might have felt obligated to forgive Michael, to rebuild a relationship based on guilt and tradition. But that woman was gone. Sarah scheduled a meeting with Michael's attorney, not for reconciliation, but to establish something clearly. What kind of establishment? I want Michael to understand that his actions had consequences beyond legal punishment. I want him to know that. He destroyed our relationship permanently, and that his children will grow up understanding why their father went to prison. That seems harsh, Eleanor. Good. It's intended to be harsh. Michael made adult decisions that harmed people he was supposed to love and protect. He doesn't get to escape the emotional consequences just because he's written some prison correspondence. Sarah made notes in her leather portfolio. And the grandchildren? Michael's requested supervised visits with them. My relationship with Michael's children will be based on their choices when they become adults, not their father's rehabilitation efforts. The doorbell chimed. Through the window, I could see a delivery truck with a large package. Must be the new equipment for the studio, I told Sarah. The art studio had been my favorite renovation project. Thomas's former office was now a bright, spacious area where I was rediscovering my passion for painting, something I had abandoned when I married and assumed the role of supporting wife and mother. Eleanor, can I ask you something personal? Certainly. Do you ever regret how this all developed? The prison sentences, the media attention, the permanent family separation. I considered the question while signing for my delivery. 6 months ago, I had been invisible, a widow with no money, no home, and no prospects for the future. Today, I was a millionaire philanthropist with a foundation, a documentary deal, and a purpose that extended far beyond my own. Survival. Sarah, my son, attempted to steal everything I owned and leave me homeless. My daughter-in-law created fraudulent documents and threatened me with blackmail based on their criminal activities. They showed me exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless to stop them. But they're still family, Sarah protested gently. No, they're still DNA. Family are the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, not the people who exploit your vulnerability for criminal profit. Sarah closed her portfolio, satisfied with my response. Besides, I added, look what I became when I stopped allowing them to define my worth. After Sarah departed, I walked through my house. Really my house now. Decorated according to my taste, organized around my priorities. In the art studio, I uncovered my latest painting, a self-portrait of a woman standing in brilliant sunlight, her face turned toward the future. The woman in the painting looked nothing like the grieving widow who had packed her life into 2 suitcases 6 months ago. This woman looked powerful, independent, fearless. She looked like someone who had learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be. My phone rang as I admired my artwork. "Eleanor, this is Director Patricia Williams from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a proposition that might interest you. The FBI wanted me to consult on elder abuse cases, using my experience to train agents in recognizing family financial fraud patterns. My story wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional expertise that could protect other families. Director Williams, I would be honored to help." Within months, I was traveling across the country, speaking at law enforcement conferences, training federal agents, and consulting with prosecutors about elder abuse cases. My transformation from victim to advocate to expert was complete. But the most meaningful moment came 1 year after Michael's arrest, when I received a letter from a stranger in Oregon. "Mrs. Davidson," she wrote, "I saw your interview on the news and recognized the warning signs in my own family. Your story gave me the courage to contact authorities before my daughter could steal my inheritance. Thank you for saving my life." I sat in my sunlit kitchen, surrounded by evidence of the life I had built from the ashes of my son's betrayal, and realized that Thomas's final gift wasn't just financial security. It was the opportunity to transform my pain into protection for others, my vulnerability into strength for those who needed it most. Outside, the sunset painted the sky behind trees. I had planted myself in soil that belonged to me, on property I had defended through intelligence and courage rather than inherited through marriage or birth. Tomorrow I would continue building the life I had chosen, rather than the life others had planned for me. And if Michael wanted to rebuild a relationship with this woman, he would need to bring far more than prison letters and hollow apologies. He would need to bring a complete transformation that matched my own, and an understanding that some betrayals create permanent consequences that no amount of regret can undo. The truth was simpler than forgiveness or revenge. I had discovered who I was when I stopped being who others expected me to be. Michael's betrayal had set me free to become the woman I was always meant to be, independent, powerful, and unafraid to protect myself and others from those who would exploit vulnerability for personal gain. Thanks for listening to this journey. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters, and your strength is greater than you know.